Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on behalf of the Economic Developers Council of Ontario. I am pleased to welcome you to our third Trade and Tariff virtual roundtable discussion um, as we all work together to navigate this ever-changing economic landscape. It can be quite difficult, and it's nice to be able to collaborate with one another in this space. Um, we have Brock back again this week, and I express my sincere gratitude to Brock for being with us today and facilitating our conversation and giving us some insights. And for everyone here, thank you for attending. I thank you and applaud your commitment to economic development on Ontario, and we look to help you navigate through all of these things and share information as we can. I'll note that we do have our trade and tariff resource page that we're continually updating as things come up. And with the Ontario government going back to the legislature I guess in 2 weeks, we should see some movement on different programs, and we'll be able to get an update from them on the 17th of April. So we look forward to that. So for now, I'm going to pass it over to Brock, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Stephanie. I'm just going to try to share my screen here. Always a challenge to make sure that this kind of opens up the right way. Is that showing full screen? No.
It is showing, but not full screen.
There we go.
There you go.
Success. So it's great to be back at this session. I missed the last one, and I understand that it went really well. Lots of great discussions. But I wanted to kind of start off this morning by just reflecting a little bit on what's happened in the last week or so as we continue to deal with all of the insanity around the trade and tariff stuff. And I think, we've sort of all recognized that there's a kind of a central driver in this discussion, and it's the Trump administration, it's President Trump himself. And so that will naturally, I think, guide some of the comments that I want to make at the outset this week, just because so much has come out of the White House in the last few days that it's a little bit crazy. Since this is my second session, I was sort of feeling like this is part deux of the whole of the tariff discussion, right? Like I sort of feel sometimes like we're in a really bad movie or a really cheesy story or something like that, just because you couldn't make up half the stuff that's happening. And at the start of the week, we might have felt that this was one of the biggest things to come out of the White House this week, right? Like it was Kid Rock week at the White House, and who'd have ever thought that those words would go together in the same sentence? But of course, Kid Rock was trumped later in the week by the arrival of Liberation Day, when we were supposedly going to finally get a little bit of clarity around what was going on the tariff front. And I think while we certainly learned a lot from Liberation Day, it's also raised an awful lot of questions. So I think one of the first things that we saw was, yes, we did get some actual numbers. We started to kind of see exactly what was going to be happening on the tariff front. And this has sort of rolled out at a global level. But I think that the kind of the approach that the announcements on Liberation Day took raised as many questions as they answered. And part of it was we got this long list of countries. This is just part of it. We got this long list of countries and the tariffs that were going to be applied. And the first question was, where's Canada? Because we weren't part of the list. We were part of this structure of this chart to kind of explain what was going on. So I will kind of sort of come back to that in a couple of moments to sort of try to get a read on exactly where we are in the Canadian context. But this kind of dump of, large charts at the center of the Rose Garden press conference did raise a number of questions pretty immediately for folks around the world. And one of those was, where the heck did these numbers come from? Because nobody has tariff structures like this. You can see on the right-hand side, the European Union, second from the top. The European Union's tariffs on U.S. imports, depending who you ask, sort of range between 1.9% and 2.8%. So where did this suggestion of 39% tariffs come from? And this was the sort of the first surprise of many over the course of Liberation Day was, there's some weird math going on here. Can anybody figure this out? Do we actually have a sense of what this stuff means and where it's going? And in fact, it's an old university friend of mine, Jim Surowiecki, who cracked the puzzle. He's a journalist with the New York Times. Jim sort of figured out the math behind find where these tariffs came from. And it was a sort of a weird calculation. Basically, the Trump administration was taking their trade deficit, dividing it by the amount of imports, and then dividing that again by two, right? So to figure out what their tariff would be. This is not complex math. Economists, when they saw this, were sort of aghast because just randomly adding and dividing and sort of using these numbers makes no sense from an economics perspective. There's no rationale for combining these numbers in this way. It doesn't tell us anything about tariffs or trade barriers, and yet somehow this was what was going on. And Jim, when he put this stuff together, wasn't sure. He said the numbers matched up, but he couldn't believe that this was just what they had done. So shortly after he released that, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative sort of released the formal math behind their tariff calculations. This is it here. I am not a mathematician, so this looks like a gobbledygook to me. But Paul Krugman, who is a Nobel Prize winning economist, said if you look at it, all those fancy Greek letters just cancel each other out, and what you're left with is exactly what Jim Surowiecki said was happening in the math calculation. That this is literally what they have done. This was a way to kind of fancy it up and make it look like it's based in kind of sound mathematics or economic thinking, but the reality is no, it's just nonsense. And so this again sort of leaves some interesting questions of, well, where did this stuff come from? And in fact, we have the answer to that as well. Imagine if you were to sort of ask GPT what a policy should be. This apparently is where the Trump administration came up with this formula. Because if you were to ask any of the generative AI systems listed in this post that I've copied here, they would all produce a very similar response, which would be the formula that Trump has apparently used. So nobody on the policy side, no economist, no trade expert figured this out. It was an AI system answering a question about this, which makes me think that some of Trump's Doge kids may have been working on this. Maybe excuse my language, but Big Ball 69 was one of the key guys, perhaps sort of figuring out what was going on the trade side. And so this kind of raises a couple of questions. The first is obviously nobody in the White House, in the administration, really has a clue about how this stuff works, right? If we're using ChatGPT and kind of back of the napkin calculations to sort of figure this out, there's not a lot of logic. There's not a lot of academic rigor. There's not a lot of careful thinking that's gone into this. So then the question becomes, so what's the goal in this? Is it to create a tariff structure based on ChatGPT, or is there some kind of master negotiation going on in the background, and this whole thing is a bait and switch exercise? Hard to tell. We don't know at this point, and that's been sort of part of the challenge all the way along, is that the chaos makes it really difficult to kind of figure out exactly what's happening. And this leads us in kind of interesting directions. So as we think about the way that the tariffs are now going to be applied according to ChatGPT's calculations, we have slapped a 10% tariff on the Heard and McDonald Islanders. If you haven't heard of Heard and McDonald Island, it's an overseas territory of Australia. You are looking in this picture at the entire population of Heard and McDonald Islands. There are no people who live there. And in fact, there has been no economic activity on those islands since the whaling industry shut down its operations there in 1877. But they're now subject to a 10% tariff on all trade with the United States, right? And so we've got this kind of sense that there are now numbers in place, there are now systems in place, but they don't seem to be based in reality, and we don't have a good handle on whether this is yet another shock tactic, yet another negotiating ploy, or whether this is something that they're really planning to move forward with. And I guess part of the confusion is that in the middle of this, it's hard to kind of figure out exactly where Canada stands, that there's been so much stuff back and forth, and sometimes we're involved and sometimes we're not. Where do we sit currently with tariffs? Well, this is the most recent list. This is, as of yesterday, the list of tariffs that actually apply to Canada and the list of retaliatory measures that we have taken. So this is from CBC. You can sort of, I'll share these slides with EDCO afterwards, and in case they want to distribute them. But this is the list, and you can go to CBC and sort of Google this and sort of find access to this. But part of the confusion that we have is talking to our local companies about exactly what tariffs apply to Canada at this point, and it has been a little bit all over the map. I'd be willing to bet that this list will change a little bit by next week, but at least this gives you a sense of where we sit today. I think the broader sort of question is, how do we sort of stay on top of this moving forward? And I found a great tool this week that's really helping me kind of understand this. This is from an organization called the Observatory of Economic Complexity. I put the URL here, but it's basically a calculator that allows you to figure out exactly what tariffs are being applied at any sort of given moment. This is a beta version. They're sort of still working on it, but essentially you can choose from the drop-down menus you see at the top to kind of pick and select different countries and sort of see what tariffs are being imposed at each end of that relationship and what the likely impact of that is. So in this case, I've said for goods being imported to the United States from Canada, we can see in that middle chart there that Canada is likely to lose, there's a negative $54 billion impact here. The other countries in that middle chart are the ones that may pick up the slack, that might get benefits from the loss of Canadian exports into the US. They'll be able to replace some of those. And on the right-hand side, you can kind of see these are the industries, starting with crude petroleum, that will be, sorry, on the left-hand side there. These are the industries starting with crude petroleum that will be most impacted by the tariffs, and we'll sort of see the largest substitution effect. So, this is a far step from some of the simple tools we saw in the early days. We're starting to get some more powerful tools available to us. And I would sort of keep an eye on this one as something that could be really useful to you at the local level in terms of understanding not just what countries are paying what amounts of tariffs, but how that starts to translate into which industries and which economic activities. So I think this will be a really useful tool. I would guess that, the sort of the biggest implication of all of this is, of course, that uncertainty is causing chaos in the markets and chaos in business making decision chains. This is the TSX, the Toronto Stock Exchange, its performance over the last 5 days. And we can see that, the Liberation Day announcements certainly had an impact on the Canadian market, that this is sort of causing some chaos. And we have to anticipate that there's going to be some negative implications in this. Prime Minister Carney said on the French language leaders' interviews in Quebec last night that he could not rule out the strong possibility that we could be led into a recession by an American recession in the course of the next few months. And so we have to start to recognize the kind of the negative implications here. But as bad as some of these indicators are, and it's not nice to see the market take a deep dive like that. The reality is that we're all sort of experiencing this thing. This is a global process at this point, and we can see, the tail end of this chart. This is stock exchanges around the world. The tail end of this chart shows just in the last few days since sort of April 2nd, April 3rd, the Liberation Day stuff, that virtually all markets around the world have fallen substantially. For some reason, the Mexicans have avoided some of this. There may be some optimistic Mexican investors, but Hong Kong, Germany, Europe as a whole, you can see them way down. The fascinating thing for me is that nobody is down as much as the Americans are. This is one of those potential silver linings in all of this, that the pain that the American economy feels is probably going to be what prompts policy changes at the US level. And so we can't avoid some of this pain moving forward, but we can hope that as others experience it, it starts to impact decision making. And I will say that in the midst of those negative signs, there are some pretty positive signs as well. So just yesterday, the Minth Group, an automotive parts manufacturer, announced a new investment in Windsor. Congrats to Windsor Essex, Invest Windsor Essex and the City of Windsor, who were working on this, and Invest Ontario, that was kind of stick handling this. This brings 1,099 jobs to the community in the auto parts sector at a time when we're really sort of feeling there's huge risk to this sector. So the lesson in my mind here is that, yeah, it is a dangerous moment. There is some pretty scary stuff going on, but there's also positive stuff happening. And that means that we can still be kind of focused on those economic development opportunities that are going to be most beneficial to our individual community. And as always, I'll just kind of point to my YouTube channel. I'm exploring these ideas all the time now. Happy to kind of share whatever I'm figuring out there. If you find this stuff useful, that's great. Otherwise, I think there's lots of other folks that are sort of also putting great material out. As I say, this tariff calculator has been really helpful to me in the last few days. And there's starting to be kind of more powerful resources out there to help us as we kind of wrestle with the questions that we're struggling with in this space. So with that, I'm going to stop the presentation portion of things. And I think what we really want to spend our time on today is kind of a bit of chat with the group. What are the concerns and issues that you're struggling with in your community? What great resources or tools have you come across? And what are the areas where you just kind of need some help and advice as we try to figure out what's coming next? So let me open things up and see who would like to kick off discussion today.
It's a quiet group. Oh, there we go.
Hi, Janet. I see a hand up.
Hi, Brock. I just want to give a shout out saying that I was a student of the Medi program years back, and you are so informative, and I'm such a fan of you, and you have inspired me to continue to share and be a voice of economic development in Canada. And what I'm doing right now, and I shared last roundtable, is I'm working in partnership with York University and the United Nations Institute of Training and Research to put forth a speaker series that comes with a micro credential on understanding U.S. tariffs and the impact on the Canadian economy. So next week, Thursday, we're having speakers such as Brendan Sweeney, Managing Director of Trillium Network for Advanced Manufacturing, talking about opportunities in new markets. He just went to Germany from Hanover Messe to share about his insights on that, as well as Jana Streve, who's the CEO of Integrated Customs Services, who works in Woodstock, which 25% of the workforce is in the auto sector. So she's been supporting customs brokerage services there. And the ultimate goal for this session is to share to businesses of what is happening on the ground with customs, who should you go to, what are the questions that are asked, and what is the impact of tariffs in the US tariffs as well as Canadian retaliatory tariffs, and how does that impact a product going through the border, and who do you contact? The goal is to simplify these questions versus understanding the laws of all that or understanding all these complicated equations, but it's to break it down, know who to talk to, and move forward and create that business continuity plan to, especially for EDOs, to understand how they can support businesses in their community. So that's a little shout out there. I just want to thank EDCO for sharing that out in their newsletters as well.
Awesome, Jenna. Thank you for the very kind words to start. But that sounds like an amazing program. Can you throw some additional information in the chat, just a link to for those that hadn't noticed the information before, maybe a chance to follow up on some of that?
For sure. And I'm also looking for speakers every 2 weeks. We're going to be showcasing something. So the week after is going to be on agriculture and fishery. So yes, I would love to partner with all of you to point me to speakers, and some of you have already. I will put that link into our chat.
Awesome. And I saw that Erica was applauding that. Erica, were you aware of this program before, or is this
No,
new
no, I wasn't aware of that program. This is really exciting. So I'm glad to see that Janet's working with York University and doing this.
That's great. Other thoughts and comments, challenges that you're struggling with at the moment? Everybody's so polite this morning. We need to have the coffee on
Exactly.
on supplies.
We had one question I'd had, and we haven't been able to find any resources for it, but one of our members was asking if there was an exporter database to make it easier for communities to see who's exporting. We haven't been able to find anything on that. There's an importing database, but not an exporting database. So that was an interesting thing we've shared with the folks at MedCat and anyone else we've talked to. Oh, there's Sean.
Sean looks like he's got some thoughts on this. Yeah, Sean?
I'm just trying to find my camera here, but I had some coffee, so I have a few thoughts. So I think there's some good points on businesses just looking for, what are the tariff amounts on different products. I think just helping them with the resources, the trade trade tariff tracker tool is a good one in terms of trying to get those amounts. And I know we talked about the resource pages and all there seems like more and more is coming out, different tools that are resourceful too. So down where I am in Chatham-Kent, there's automotive supply chains. So I think just getting out to the businesses, doing those meetings, calls to really nail down on what can really help them out is really crucial right now. So with the whatever industry they're in, I think just getting in there and talking to them immediately and being proactive on that approach is going to really be appreciated of the companies and help them just navigate and whatever programs may come out, then just making sure that they're aware of those programs too. So mix of everything, I guess, a mix of the tools available and just that increased awareness.
Right. Yeah. And as you talk to the automotive companies in your community, Sean, are they able to sort of articulate or share information about their supply chains, or which of their members or which of their partners are exporters?
I think it's still very early stages, and also anything that's within Kuzma, or if it's outside of that, then that will play a factor too. So I've been speaking with them kind of, I guess, before the Liberation Day a bit, and then after, like what does that play in as a factor? But I think if it falls within that, the Kuzma agreement and conditions on that, then that will play a factor. I know, obviously, there's a lot of companies that do also diversify their products. So I think increasing that has been helping them too. Some of them have learned from the recession years and years back where they've been trying to do that, but just not enough. So I think trying to increase that and diversification options is still a way forward, I think, on some of the businesses that were traditionally too reliant on the US as an option.
Right. Anybody else with thoughts on how to sort of find the exporters or find the lists of exporters? Stephanie, I wonder about Catherine.
Hey there, everyone. Hey, Brock and Stephanie. Don't have a specific answer to your question, Brock, although I think that would be helpful. Just as I was hearing Sean speak, I'm thinking, don't want to put more work on your plate either, EDCO, Stephanie, but, because economic developers, like at the municipal level, you're really like the ears on the ground of what's happening. Is it useful to kind of maintain some sort of survey tool where we're monitoring trends and trying to capture like what our community needs so we could appropriately advocate to other levels of government? Like we are hearing a groundswell of, we need an exporter database. I mean, like one of the things that I think about is, like beyond an exporter database, it's like just understanding our supply chains and how can we plug into other provincial supply chains, other suppliers, other, beyond our regional supply chains. But is that even something that businesses want? As a consultant, I don't have my ear to the ground in the same way, but, capturing a survey and kind of advocating might be helpful going forward.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
And I think something might need to be at least partially survey based anyway, because there may be sort of privacy questions around, well, I'm going to hand you a list of what all these different companies are doing that they may need to self-identify to some extent too. And so survey work could be a way of starting to get at some of those ideas as well. Who are you aware of in your community who's exporting, that kind of thing. Ms. Ladd.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for hosting this roundtable. I think it's excellent. As Catherine mentioned, the survey, it actually dawned on me that, so I work with the City of Markham. We use the York Region Employment Survey as our employment database. And there's actually a question in there that says, do you export? So I don't know if other employment surveys perhaps have that question that people can draw on to create lists of exporters, but that could be an option. I did want to make another comment as to what we're hearing on the ground, though. So as we're speaking with businesses, one of the key questions that comes up with how did the federal government come up with the list of goods that go on the list of retaliatory tariffs, right? And honestly, I don't have that answer, but I don't know if this is going to be useful for anyone. But I recently discovered that there's actually, if you have like a particular product that will be hit with a retaliatory tariff, there's a remissions process you can apply for through the federal government to prove that perhaps that if you can't get this product anywhere except the US, it's not, you can't buy Canadian on it. But I can share that link with people because I found that helpful to be able to share with businesses to say, if you can't get that product in Canada or anywhere else in the world, you can apply to the federal government for them to grant an exemption on a tariff.
Excellent. And maybe that's a question we can circle back to in a moment. I would just, before we kind of leave the exporter side of things, maybe say that, there's the export associations that are out there, like CME, the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters. They may be willing to partner around the development of some lists in this space, particularly if they feel that economic developers might be able to kind of assist their members in some ways. And so perhaps by kind of teaming up with a few of those associations, we could do some interesting things. But we've just had that sort of interesting question raised around the retaliatory tariffs that we're putting in place on the Canadian side. Does anybody have any insight into, how we've been selecting targets or what the process has been for that, or any kind of sense of how that's playing out in the context of your own communities? A bit of a mystery to all of us, apparently. Yeah, it's the black box kind of a problem, right? That we've got these retaliatory tariffs. I heard today that umbrellas were one of the things that we had retaliated in the tariffs against, right? So we're tariffing American umbrellas. How that got added to the list, I don't really know. So I think lots of mysteries in this space still. It feels like we've been living this stuff forever, but I guess in fact it has been about 8 weeks and 9 weeks, and so there's lots of things we still don't know about the space. What other kind of issues or concerns are you hearing within your communities about the process? Is automotive top of mind? Is agriculture kind of sort of looming large as a sector that's struggling? What's the feedback you're getting at the local level? Stacy.
Hi, how's it going? I don't know if you can hear me. My mic sometimes doesn't work accurately, but we have experienced our first industry shutting down as a result of their automotive tooling, and they've been in our community for 77 years. They employ about 65 people, and what's interesting is, our mayor's been chatting with their president, but an opportunity has come out of it because we don't have a lot of land that is ready for shovel ready, and we also don't have a lot of buildings that are, of purchasable value for many of the industries. So one of our companies was actually looking at moving outside of our jurisdiction, and they have now, it's my understanding, worked out an agreement to purchase the building. And it's an opportunity for us. This is just news within the last 2 days, so we're just trying to navigate how to help them through the process of the employees that are going from one company to potentially how to get them out for our other industries. So it is opening our eyes to what, there's a lot of, it's really sad that this industry is shutting down. They don't say as a result of this, it's just they've been struggling for the past year or so. So it is interesting to look at things that way and see how these 65 people that have been employed at this company, we need those people. So working with that company as well as the company moving in to get them set up into their larger facilities. So I think that it's a terrible news story, but also there's a very bright light coming out of it. As well, we're just hearing a lot of sort of the same thing. Everyone's just waiting around, waiting to see what's happening. But we have had a number of companies advise us that they've been receiving a lot more calls and inquiries about additional work being brought on, and if they can facilitate it, and this goes across the board and in most of our manufacturing industries that I've spoken to. So, and I have heard a number of companies also speak about US companies reaching out and getting manufacturing here because the dollar is a wash. So, we are seeing the positives and the negatives, but I think it is that wait and see, and all these resources are wonderful. So thank you for providing them, and thank you for your weekly YouTube stories and information sessions, because they're very helpful. So, and thanks to EDCO for putting this on.
Stacey, do I remember right? You're in Brantford, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So this company that's sort of shut down its operations, are they seeing this as a temporary thing, or is this something that they're imagining is going to be longer term?
It is done. So they and what's interesting is I always look at the wording, and the wording is they've made the sad but not difficult decision to cease operations. So it might be one of those it's been in the family, but they have 65 employees and long-standing within our community. Yeah, they say, unfortunately, the automotive tooling industry in North America is not viable now nor in the foreseeable future. So quite a bit of wording in the email, but yeah.
Yeah, you can definitely hear the pain and the struggle when they word it like that. It's a real insight into the issues that the owners are dealing with on these things.
It is, yes.
Anybody with similar experiences in their communities so far? So, Stacey, the other side of what you were talking about was the silver lining, the bright light that this has kind of opened up some space, which is in short supply. There's obviously another company that's kind of sort of moving into that space. Does that represent outside of the automotive sector a fair level of optimism in the community?
I believe so. It's an automation company that we currently have, and they're bursting at the seams right now. And it was important for them to have a location that's accessible by public transit, and that can accommodate their future growth. So um, I'm very happy that we're able to keep them in our city limits.
That's great. I see the hands up, so let me go to Janet, and then we'll move on from there to Sean. But Janet, thoughts on this or other issues?
Yeah, so I've been talking to businesses affected for manufacturing, especially due to the fact that my course is next week. And in Windsor, there was an order from Unifor, the union, to shut down Stellantis. I don't think I'm pronouncing the name right, but for 2 weeks. So it's a temporary shutdown, and I'm just curious if temporary shutdowns are happening in communities right now to not fully cease, but just see how this weathers through.
Yeah, maybe before we move on to Sean, has anybody else seen the temporary shutdowns? I know that the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association has said that the entire industry across North America could shut down within 2 weeks if the tariffs come fully into effect. So I think we can anticipate more. But has anybody else seen this happen so far? I guess that's a good sign. Not yet. Maybe the way we can interpret silence there. So Janet, yeah, I would anticipate more of this happening in the next little bit. The uncertainty, I think the combination of the uncertainty certainly makes it difficult to sort of produce parts when you don't know if you've got a buyer set up for them at some cost that could change next week. I think the other thing that we talked about two sessions ago a little bit was that a lot of companies had ramped up their production late in 2024 to ship out in January before tariffs came into effect. And so having kind of pre-produced a lot of product, there may be a bit of a glut in the marketplace that they have to kind of wait to filter through before they go back into production. And so there could be a little bit of both effects kind of playing out in that regard. Sean, you've got a hand back up.
Yeah, I guess I could add a little bit to the Stellantis impact too. And as we saw that there was layoffs across the border and like both Canada and the US, so we're starting to see that. But to the point of it could be based on sales, slow up sales, and there was some indication prior to the tariff announcements that there was already some issues with that with certain companies that might have. It's kind of like that extra push for them to look at what they have to do to adjust, due to the tariffs impacted on them. The other thing I was going to mention was just CIP programs or any incentives that can maybe be looked at or adjusted to help entice new investment opportunities. So similar to the Brantford example, we have so much land that's maybe serviced or shovel ready. So maybe looking at our CIP or incentive programs to look at, maybe bringing certain industries in or making tweaks to those programs that could help bring kind of what we really need to look at now too. So some of those companies we may be relying on overseas, well, maybe now's the time to kind of adjust some of those policies and maybe push them out further to try to increase that investment.
Yeah, excellent. Great suggestions. Anybody else with thoughts about how we may be able to start to respond to some of this at the local level? I'm gonna start putting folks on the hot seat again. We haven't heard from anybody. Well, I don't think we've heard from anybody in Eastern Ontario yet. How are things in Eastern Ontario versus, the kinds of things that we've been talking about in other parts of the province? Jay, any thoughts that I told you I was going to start putting people on the spot. Jay, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, you did. Sorry, I just we're heading off to Ottawa for the Heart and Cheap Trick concert shortly, so I'm not really dressed to present or anything. Brock, it's interesting. A lot of our communities are taking action. They have right from the start. The buy local. We're really just in wait and see, and you described it very well, of the challenges and the uncertainty. But it certainly is, it will never go back. I think there's going to be an adjustment period. But Canada is in a pretty strong position. Eastern Ontario, we'd already seen the big $3 billion battery components plant put on pause, the Belgian company in Loyalist Township. We had a big contingent over at Hanover Messe, and obviously that was a kind of a rallying of the partnership we have with European countries. And to be honest, we're a regional marketing organization. Our primary goal is to promote the region collectively, to compete with the bigger communities, larger cities, and we've had good success. But we've been looking at Europe for a long time. At least since the last Trump administration. Have had lots of opportunities coming from Europe. Ironically, part of the reason they like Canada, or some companies do, is because of access to U.S. markets. So that strategy will change. But there always was a huge cost advantage when you look at the dollar. As much as we don't like it, if we're going to the States with the 40-cent difference, that's a huge advantage for companies doing business here in Eastern Ontario. Not to mention the healthcare with 35% cost advantage. So when you do the math on that, it barely costs anything to run a company in Ontario or Eastern Canada, Eastern Ontario. So I think it's just a time to adjust. But I was reminded, Brock, and you may have spoken on this on one of the previous sessions here, the reason that our region, and I think a lot of places in Ontario, have long-standing U.S. branch plants, and I'm talking about places like Kellogg's, Quaker, PepsiCo, GE, the list goes on, is because of tariffs 100 years ago, 150 years ago, or 120 when they came. So companies that want to do business and access Canadian markets, we're seeing there are going to be opportunities. So that's just off the cuff and just planning to watch you quietly. So I appreciate you asking. But again, we're important part of Ontario, 2.5 million people. A big chunk of the economy will be impacted like the rest of the region, but we are seeing interest, and I'm in our lead generation project. We've last week had 3 exceptional leads, 2 of them from the US, one from Wisconsin and one from California. So things are still happening in the business world, and we'll plow ahead and see how things shake out. Ontario East Municipal Conference, September 17th to 19th in Ottawa. We want to see everybody there. It should be great. We'll have a plenary talking about whatever the status of this issue is in September. A lot's going to happen until then. But appreciate everything you guys are doing here, Brock.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about September's event and the plenary and stuff like that. And I think at this stage, we all want good ideas from all sources. So it's great to see that Ontario East is working away at that. And thanks for your work on that front, Jay.
Oh, great. Thank you.
One interesting thing to maybe pick up on, you talked about that sort of that tradition of the branch plant operations because of the historic tariffs in Canada-US trade. Interesting comments I heard the other day around the automotive sector again, that if this stuff proceeds and we end up kind of having to sort of carve up the automotive market a little bit, that Canada still remains the 10th largest automotive market in the world. Which would certainly make it large enough to sustain its own domestic automotive industry. And that probably doesn't mean, Canadian car manufacturers popping up, but it would mean things like, Stellantis and Ford and Toyota and Honda and others, manufacturing vehicles in Canada specifically for the Canadian market. So even in a worst case scenario, there's this sense that, the Canadian market is big and it's strong. And, we're a G7 economy. And living next to the States, we sometimes feel like the small player, but in that global context, we're actually a pretty big player.
It's true, and part of the G7. But you remind me, I don't know if we want the Bricklin to come back, but maybe the economy's ready for it this time around. But that would be and the other thing we got to mention, all our communities here across Ontario. Here's what we promote: productivity. Believe it or not, in those facilities, that's why they're here. If they're U.S. or European owned, excellent productivity, excellent work ethic. And the quality, and that's the other thing. So here now, Americans are going to have to buy more expensive cars with less quality, and there is a great opportunity here, I think. So that's, I think, how we look at it. And it is time. I think regrouping and not relying on the American economy when it's uncertain. And there's a lot of uncertainty around the world, but I think this is it's a learning opportunity, and it's really interesting to see. And I think, the Canadians of all stripes and all political stripes are looking to work together to like it. And I got to say, the Premier just reelected for 4 years, took a strong stand on things, and showing that Canada is not just going to be a pushover, and that's good. And we are like that. And this whole elbows up thing. I mean, yeah, we know what we're like as Canadians. We're very friendly, but don't get in a fight with us, because we do come out on top. So
awesome. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
I do see a comment in the chat from Janet. Maybe I'll circle back to you in a minute on that, Janet, but I see in the meantime that Crystal has a hand up.
Hi, thanks. I'm losing my voice a little bit, so handle that. I saw a comment in the chat about business retention and expansion. We have a great program at the province here for BRE. We have some training coming up starting at the end of this month. So on April 30th, online 3-part session. Really, for some of those smaller communities that have a hard time understanding what their businesses are doing or getting to know them better, building those relationships, you can craft your BRE questions to go in different ways, right? You can create that hybrid interview process where you're just getting their contact, those yes and no questions, and then that opens the door maybe so that you can go and have that conversation and have a little bit more detail about certain topics too. So I think that's a great tool that can be really crafted to suit your needs, but you can get really focused with sectors and areas, but also ask those certain questions that will allow you to sort of use that data in other ways too. So a great tool, I think, to always look to to make sure that you have those great business lists. I know that at the beginning of the pandemic, being able to go to a business directory with NAICS codes and seeing like how many of our businesses are affected by this, like what's open, what's closed based on those NAICS codes, and being able to go to your council and express those data and those numbers so that they could see the impact that you have locally, not just what's being said on the larger scales too. So giving that context and that will help you sort of move your projects or your ideas forward, because you have that true data. And the same with if you locally have money or funding, how can you ground that information in fact, so that you can get that funding, or you can convince your council to shift some funds, but also feel really confident about the direction that you're going, so that you feel good about where you're going. So I'll put a link in the chat for the BRD training. Really, you take all the information in and then you craft it for what works best for your community and your purpose. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Crystal. And I think, yeah, there's a certain aspect of this that is kind of back to basics for us as economic developers, right? Back to the things we've done before that have worked, that are tried and tested and true. Engage with your businesses, get in there with that business retention discussion to kind of figure out what the issues are, what the challenges are. Look at some of the tools that we rolled out during the pandemic, whether it's buy local or sort of, support local businesses or staycations in the tourism sector. How do we kind of bring these ideas back to the fore so we can put them to work in the context of a tariff crisis as well? So great to see that you're reminding us about that, but great also to see that there's that continued kind of capacity building and training available through your department to help us kind of do some of that kind of stuff. So that would be great. And you're getting some love in the chat as well about all this stuff. So awesome. Janet, I said I was going to circle back to you in a minute to sort of follow up on your comment. It says here, has anyone heard of good opportunities with Can Export, SME, and AMIC programs? Can you share a little bit what you're thinking of there and the kinds of things you're looking to find out?
Are you asking me about it?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Just to reframe the question for the group, and then we'll see if there's any responses there.
Yeah, so Amani alumni, Ben Shantz, he's a business advisor with Ministry of Ontario, and he was sharing about the Can Export and AMIC program to help with businesses in diversifying their markets. And I'm just curious on the floor if you guys have heard any businesses seeking that, asking questions about that, and if it has been helpful, or this is just something that you're looking into right now. Just curious about programs and if they're helpful. And I'll be speaking with him next week about it and hopefully bring it up during my chat, the webinar series.
Has anybody had any experience with those programs or other sort of export diversification supports that might be out there? I think sometimes the non-response is as revealing as a response, right? That a lot of these programs. Stephanie, I'll be careful what I say because we're at an official EDCO meeting here, right? But sometimes these programs are not as responsive or available or as in line with our needs as we might hope. And so there's lots of great initiatives, but if we can't tap into them at the local level, it sometimes is a sign that maybe we need to retool some of this a little bit. So maybe a lesson to kind of take away from the discussion around accessing some of these programs is if the economic development community isn't engaged with them, isn't aware of them, isn't using them, that there may be some barriers to some of that. Anybody want to correct me on that? Anybody had a great experience with those programs that they can share? All right. So Janet, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just saying, if no one hasn't, I can share my contact, Ben. That's the beauty of being part of many. It's like you're just always connected. I'll share his contact because he is sharing a lot of on social media. It's like, if you're not sure, contact me. I'm happy to give you updates on these programs, and it's always good to be connected. He's the senior business advisor for Ontario Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. So yeah, I'll pop his information down there.
Awesome. And I'll say I've known Ben for years, super approachable, super nice guy. So I'm sure he would be more than happy to chat with anybody on this discussion around some of these opportunities. We do have a few folks from different ministries on the call. Crystal, you had spoken up already, but are we hearing anything at MedCat or Rural Affairs or other places about ways in which municipalities or local economic development structures could help support what the province is trying to do? Are there areas that we could be better or more active in a way that benefits what the ministries are trying to do in this space?
It's a quiet group.
I'm going to start voluntolding people again. You saw me put Jay on the spot there a couple of minutes ago.
Fair's fair, right? I did, you had mentioned tourism, and we received Tayo's newsletter this morning. I thought I'd just mention, in case people are not aware, they are heavily advocating to increase the budget for Destination Ontario, promoting Ontario as a staycation and vacation place. It's perfectly aligned to try and keep people in Ontario and exploring our province. They also are supporting, and EDCO has supported the Ontario Restaurant Hotel Motel Association's recommendation to bring back the travel related credit that was out in, I guess that was 2021 maybe, through the COVID pandemic. So those are two things that are happening from a tourism front that Tayo is advocating with the government on right now.
Excellent. I do see that we've got at least three. Oh, look at that. Serena jumped in to save some other folks I was about to put on the spot. So, Serena.
No, yes. Good morning. Thank you so much. I just wanted to share, in terms of if you're looking for any data to help any of your decision making, we will have an analyst webinar next or in 2 Tuesdays on the 15th. And I'll add that link in. It's really great. You can see imports and exports, and you can also see who's posting and jobs, job patterns, which is really great to help, if you're reaching out or you're, making predictions based off the tariffs as to who's gonna any vulnerable sectors. It's a great way of kind of pinpointing best connections. And I'm happy to help anyone look for data as well. So I'll share that information in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Serena. That's a great addition to the discussion. I do see we have a number of folks from the Ministry of Economic Development. I see Caitlin and Sarah and Vienna. Again, not to put anybody on the spot, Chatham House rules, no attribution on anything that gets said in here. What's sort of top of mind at the ministry level? Are there things that you wish we were a little better aware of at the local level as you sort of struggle with some aspects of these issues?
Hi, everyone. I can speak to this.
Having been forced to, I apologize, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm happy to be voluntold to speak to this. No, I'm just kidding. It feels a little bit hard to answer that question. Like, within our division at the ministry, there are some teams that are quite plugged into different communities around the province and are really teams that are distributed across the province. But from the side of our team, myself and Sarah and Caitlin, we're in the small business branch. And what we've been trying to do really over the last couple months is just try to get much more of an ear to the ground, which is why we're attending this session and have sought to attend some similar sessions over the last little while. But it does feel, kind of difficult in this context to get data that is specifically on the tariff impacts. Like, there's so many different things that would impact any sort of data we're seeing. So in whatever way we can, that's kind of what we've been trying to do. So that's a little bit maybe of a non-answer to your question, Brock, but just to provide yeah, kind of like where we're at.
No, that's actually really helpful. And just knowing that you and some of your colleagues are here on the calls, I think is reassuring for a lot of communities as well. And knowing that there's kind of resources to reach out to and people that they can speak with as questions arise, I think is really helpful. So thanks for being here, and thanks for your input, even if I did force you to kind of turn the camera on there, but
Happy to.
really appreciated.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts? I see there's lots of stuff going into the chat in terms of posts and additional materials. Other thoughts or questions that people would like to raise before we kind of move towards the end of the session? How's everybody feeling from a kind of a general mental health and well-being perspective? Are people struggling? Are people doing okay? Are you feeling like folks are around to help you, Belinda?
Good question, Brock. I don't know who else was on the EDAC call yesterday. They hosted their first roundtable, and that did come up as something that people are interested in having resources on. And I know Alberta EDA, they do have a mental health tool or resource training. So I wondered if there might be an opportunity, Stephanie, to partner with EDA on that mental health piece, because yeah, it's interesting times.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, excellent. If there's something that's out there already developed by one of our partners, that would be great to kind of bring to the table and see if we can adapt it for Ontario. Yeah. I think there's no question that this is a difficult time and it will get more difficult. So it's okay, I think, to feel stressed and to feel overwhelmed by some of this. Part of the role of those in economic development is to have broad shoulders to kind of bear some of the weight of what's going on in the community. And I think the great thing about organizations like EDCO is, though sometimes we can feel alone in the community, we can feel as part of this group outside of the community, that there are resources, there are allies, there are people who know exactly what you're going through. So you've had a tough day and you're struggling, reach out to the EDO in the next community over or 3 communities over or whatever it is, because I'm sure they'd be happy to kind of chat through it and share their own frustrations as well. It's one of those things where, working through it together is probably one of the best ways to kind of approach this, that we don't have to go it alone on some of these issues. Janet.
I guess one big thing that I just want to say thank you to like a lot of people that have supported me on this series, like Belinda. Like it just began with me talking to Gordon, who was on the EDCO, about I just need to get some speakers going. Shifts me to Belinda. Belinda shifts me to Brad from Woodstock. Brad to 2 other speakers, and that is how the momentum was going. It is through EDCO, and it is through like people who are just believing in the mission of sharing and supporting businesses and communities. So thank you for this roundtable, and thank you for what you do.
Awesome. Belinda.
Yeah, it's just funny, kind of a weird situation that we have here, which I couldn't help Janet out funny because she was looking for an auto parts person. So that's fine. We do have a big auto parts supplier here, but what I was hearing from them doesn't seem to be what people are hearing, which I'm very grateful for, but I'm also like, are they having rose-colored glasses on, or I don't know. So I didn't know if that would be the best speaker for her. So passed her on to Brad and Sean, actually, in Woodstock and St. Thomas. But what we were hearing from our supplier, who supplies Toyota and a little bit Honda, is our largest employer, 1,000 people. And so we were quite concerned about this stuff, but they're working overtime right now. Their message to their staff is, you keep worrying about the quality and the safety of the product, we'll worry about tariffs. And they say like there's a small inventory of the products that they supply, so there's a year waiting list. So as of last week and the couple weeks before that, they didn't seem all that concerned, to be honest, which I don't know how to take that.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure that there's a mixed feeling in that sector. There's that Mint announcement yesterday. There's your experience with the community saying full speed ahead, And yet, we heard the Brantford story, and so it's going to shake out a little differently in different places, but there are some positive aspects to some of this as well. Sean.
Very quickly, just to
Hey,
add to
now we
Glenda's
can
comment
see you.
there. Yeah, I got my camera working last minute. So yeah, some companies are able to absorb the cost too, depending on that. So that's just business as usual. They can absorb, but not all of them have that situation where it may be able to do that. So business as usual, but you might get kind of that comment from a few employers, depending on how they are able to, um, deal with the situation of that too. So it could be either one direction or the other. That's what I've been finding at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that great observation. Maybe I'll do one last call for comments or thoughts. We've hit the hour that we had allotted, but does anybody else want to add anything else to the discussion before we start to wrap up for this week? I'll just say that I appreciate. I know I sort of told some people to speak, but I always appreciate how open everybody is in these discussions, and the ideas that start to emerge as we kind of share about what we're wrestling with is really helpful. And I appreciate the stuff that goes on in these discussions. I hope you found a couple of things of value in this as well. Stephanie, uh, thank you so much for putting these together. I think they're extremely valuable, and I'm happy to be a part of it, happy to support it however I can. But kudos to you and your team for the great work in facilitating these. And I'll turn things back over to you.
Thank you very much, Brock. We really appreciate your support as well with these. Always love your insights and explanations. They break it down and make it easy to hear and understand. And I'm glad that we're providing something that our members would like. As I said earlier, on April 17th, we have our next roundtable discussion, and I've was in communication with Minister Fideli's office this morning, and it looks like they'll be able to attend that event and maybe provide some more input and outline what programs they're working on. As I said, the legislature will be back for a week at that point, and they'll have a little more time to give us some input for what's happening with the interprovincial trade as well. And as always, please reach out to Laura or myself if you have any questions or if there's a way that we can assist in providing connections in any way. We are always happy to do that. And thank you, Brock, for today's session and for everybody attending. We really appreciate your support. And with that, have a wonderful day, everyone. Happy Friday, happy weekend. It's sunny at least today.